Okay, sit back, grab a coffee, whatever you need, because this is going to take the most amount of time. And honestly, there's the only part in here that's like super high yield for the coordinators of the other tab section, which is the last one. I'm telling you it so that you can help train your faculty on how that have maybe never used ERAS to look at applications. And also so that you know where things are located. And eventually, maybe one day you may be strong enough of a coordinator to be reviewing these applications yourself. It took me 4 or 5 years before I got to that point. And the only reason I think it took me that fast, because I think it has to be at least 5 years that you've been doing this and that you're hardcore involved in all the process or whatever. But like, because my first program was a fellowship that did not use ERAS. So we reviewed those applications in detail with all the documents that were received. And so by doing that, that made me learn a lot about the process. So I think that's the only reason I did it maybe a little sooner. But this is important information to know so that you can use the filters better. Okay, view applications. So now we've already gone through like how to look at the list. Now we're going to get in depth into an application and what it's all about. So the application interface is broken up into quadrants. So the top, and I'm saying this because I'm acting like I'm looking at it, but for you it'll be over here. The top, your top right, your top left is the demographics in this little corner. There's no tabs in it. It's all there open for you to see. Your top right is going to be the documents. And these are like external documents that had to be uploaded to support the application. The bottom left is the bulk of the application data. This is where all the data fields are found. And the bottom right is what I call the other tabs. And of course, I will be going through each section. So basic demographics is your top left. So in this part, you will see their picture, their name, their preferred name. What's the difference? Is usually people that have like maybe a more complicated name, or they're originally from another country and they may have an Americanized name that they use, or something like that, or just a short name or nickname or whatever, they'll put in the preferred name. I can tell you how many times people put, like their name will be Ashley Jones, and then they put under preferred name Ashley. Oh, right, that you already put that. But I think they just want to make sure they're, everybody's always taught that when you fill out like documents and things like that, that you're not supposed to leave any documents blank. So I think that's where that comes from. They'll have their AMC ID number, their email, their phone. If you click on the email from this section here, it'll open the email interface. It's not like it's going to open it up in your email client. You can see which reviewers are assigned there. You can see their education, which includes their medical education, as well as their residency, if applicable. If I saw a new field pop up a few years ago in that section that said, like, it was while I was reviewing for residency. So there really should have been only one line for medical school there. But there was a second line, and it said campus practicing at or something like that. And so that's for your bigger medical education systems that they may actually be spending a bulk of their time at one particular place. Like when I was at Tufts, there was a track that people spent all their time out at Bay State, which was Western Mass. So that's when they'd say, oh, I really spent every time, my time in Bay State. That kind of thing. And then tracks. So tracks are they're like tracks. So they're separate sections people can apply to. So if you're a program that has more than one track, you probably understand this, but I want to explain it for a second. So the most common reason for a track is if it's like a bigger program like internal medicine, that they have individualized tracks that you want to be considered for, that you want to be considered for their main program as well as this track, because you want to just make it in. You really, really would like the track, but maybe like, even if you don't get on the track, you still are very interested in the program, kind of a thing. So you can apply to more than one. So you can apply to their main track, which is the internal medicine program, or maybe they have like a primary care track or a global health track or anything like that. Also can apply if there's Some programs have special scholarships available, meaning like not from the program directly, but they get funding from the special scholarship in order to, and so of course only a subset, a group of people can qualify for that. So there is a section that says tracks applicant applied to. So applicants can actively apply these tracks, and these tracks are actually going to become NRP tracks in your match. So that's why it's kind of separated out. But you have control over who you as a program consider to be on what tracks. So this happened a lot. Like I said, the scholarship we had in previous program, we had a special scholarship, SACM, Saudi Arabia Cultural Mission, whatever. Obviously, only people that were Saudi Arabian citizens could qualify, and they had to go through a whole rigorous process to even qualify for the scholarship before they even got to this point. So they know what that means. But then every once in a while you get an applicant that's like, I don't want to be missed out on anything. I don't want to, like, because the candidates don't always understand what the tracks mean either. So you'll get like anxious people like applying to all your tracks or whatever, even if they don't qualify for them. So that's why you have that alternate thing. It becomes important when you get to your ranking tab, which I'll talk about later on. So that's why that's important. So now we're in the top right, the documents. So these are the external documents that are uploaded as like separate things that you can print out off. This is the thing I was talking about. If you look at archives from previous years, this stuff goes away and you no longer have access to it because there's no way for them to lump that all in. So I do advise for any of your matched applicants that you download this entire application with all the documents and save it before the archive happens. But usually documents found here, it could be all different sorts of things, but these are like the normal things that you're gonna find, the average things. So the ERAS application, which is silly to me, but what they do is like they churn out, I think it's how they figure out how they're gonna print off the application. So they churn out all the information that we're gonna find all over the place here, and they put it in a document by itself. So it's like everything in one document. I guess that's how people printed the application. I never print it that way. And I would go crazy if you have like 50 people coming to interview. Anyways, so, and then the ERAS CV, which I hate the ERAS CV. They take the information that they fill out in there and they put it in some formatted CV. People can also upload their own formatted CV. There are some regular templates that are like followed in the nation on CVs. The most common one is the Harvard template, the Harvard Medical School template, which is like really easy way to read. You can't even apply to Harvard Medical School unless you have it in their format. So it's a good thing to, like, as a medical student, to actually put your CV in like Harvard format because everybody accepts it. Their medical school transcripts are uploaded there. Their MSPEs, which is a dean's letter, which FYI, during normal seasons, this is not done until October 1st. I have no idea if that's changed, so we'll see. Then their personal statement. A little note on personal statements. So these candidates can write individualized personal statements if they want. I do not, like, somebody advised somebody somewhere along the way to write a personal statement for each individual program. I do not recommend that. The personal statement is an extremely important document. It's really your chance, the candidate's chance to show their personality and show their heart and, and their passion for your specialty beyond what's on paper, beyond the fact that I got these awards and these are my scores and this is the research I've done and blah, blah, blah. You get to hear their voice a little bit. And so it's extremely important. I don't know any program that does not find it important. During the application review period though, it's not feasible to read all the personal statements, but it's really, really great for when they come for the interview. It also helps people understand what to talk to them about. Sometimes they can be over the top because people do get nervous about them, but yeah, it's really important. So these candidates can write personalized, I know it sounds really silly, personalized personal statements. And what that means is if I'm a candidate and I really like neurology and psychiatry. I'd be happy with either one, but I want to increase my chances to get a residency, so I'm going to apply to both. So obviously the same letter is not going to, the same personal statement is not going to be feasible for a neurology program and a psychiatry program at the same time, because maybe my interest in neurology is for different reasons why my interest is in psychiatry. So they can actually assign individualized personal statements to the programs or the specialties or whatever. So some people out there are getting like, I can't even imagine like applying to 100 places and writing 100 different personal statements that were individualized, but some people are doing that. In my consulting, I recommend that they don't drive themselves crazy in that way, and you'll be completely fine. Obviously their photo, like I said, their USMLE and COMLEX scores. So for those of you that do not know what this means, I'm going to explain it right now. The USMLE and COMLEX scores are basically your medical, not yours, the applicant's medical knowledge scores, basic medical knowledge. So why are there two different ones? So USMLEs are designed for MD graduates, people that are going to graduate with an MD after their name. And COMLEX are for DOs, which is osteopath. That's the difference between the two. And they have very different score systems, and it can be confusing. This is always a controversy on how to analyze these scores and things like that. But the way that it goes for, I'm going to talk about USMLE and COMLEX, is about the same. But for, I'm a medical student, a US medical student, because it's a little different. I'm going to explain at the end for the FMGs. But I'm a US medical student. I'm at the University of Idaho, let's say. And usually it's like I think it's the first year of medical school that I'm expected to take step 1. So it's like at the end of the first year, after you've taken all your base classes, your lecture classes of all the different like specialty systems and things like that. And then I take step 1. Then it's usually like first year or second year of medical school. Then in my late 3rd year, early 4th year is when I take step 2, both parts. So this is the craziest thing to me. In both of these exam systems, there's 3 steps to it. So USMLE has step 1, step 2, and step 3. COMLEX has level 1, because they gotta be different, level 1, level 2, level 3. However, on both step and level 1, that's done early on in the training. Step and level 2 both have 2 parts to it, because at that point you're starting to do rotations, you're starting to have like hands-on experience and things like that. So it's going to be more involved in that sort of thing. So it's the medical knowledge with real-time skills. So so they have 2 parts, and for USMLEs, it's they call it step 2 CS or CK. Step 2 CS is clinical skills, and step 2 CK is clinical knowledge. One of them, and I always forget which one, I'm going to guess is CK, is pass or fail. The other one, it gets a score. And I could be wrong on which one was which, but there's been controversy in the nation, and last year, before all the COVID stuff, it was reported that they are actually changing the second step 2 to pass fail as well. I'm not even going into that controversy, but it will show up in our applications for 2022, I believe. Now onto the COMLEX of the same level is the CE and PE. Now, I think CE is clinical evaluation, maybe P is performance, but I could be wrong. I'm pretty impressed I'm remembering this much off the top of my head. And it's the same thing. One of them is pass fail and the other is a score. I didn't hear any controversy about that they're going completely to pass fail in both of those exams. So I don't know. The DO subset is smaller, is a lot smaller of a subset, but it is getting bigger and bigger every year. So then the step 3s and the level 3 is you typically take those not until you're an intern into your like program. So your first year of medical school or your first year of residency. So at that point, you still have that great medical knowledge. You just earned your degree, blah, blah, blah. Now you're in usually the first year that your PGY 1 year, you cover a lot of basic medical stuff. And so you're still in that like mindset that you still got this information in there. You've practiced it a little bit, because the step 3 is a lot of like modules where you have to like answer as if you're diagnosing and things like that. So yeah, so you usually do it during that year. People get really anxious, and then intern year is a very busy year. It's a horrible year to take a test like that. So then a lot of people try and put it off as much as they can. And I highly recommend that they do not do that. For application to residency, these step 3s and level 3s do not matter, because they're not going to be passed yet, because they haven't started yet. And usually at that point, they're like, well, just pass it, just pass it. And the further on they get into their subspecialized training, the further away from they get through that daily knowledge that they need to do to take their step 3 effortlessly. So that's just, they do need step 3 in order to get licensed. They do need like full license. Step 3 to get full license, to get DEA, all that sort of thing. And then also usually fellowships will require it for part of their application system. They don't put a lot of heavy weight on it, but it's required. They obviously need it to be passed. So now that I've explained all of that, like I said, I was going to explain the FMGs. So obviously this is USMLGs. So it stands for the United States Medical Licensing Exam. And COMLEX is, I think it's the College of Osteopathic Medicine Licensing Exam. I think that's what it stands for. This is the system in the US, and the USMLEs have been around forever. They used to be a lot different, but they've been around for a really, really long time. So that we just required that they knew a certain amount of stuff before we could say, yeah, we're going to let them actually touch people, basically. So yeah, that's really what the exam is saying. So in the foreign medical education system, the US does medical education completely differently than literally everywhere in the world. The only place you're gonna find a system that you do undergrad of 4 years, and then you do medical school for 4 years, and then you go into residency, is the United States. And we're so like heavy deep into it, we forget that we're the only ones doing it this way, and we expect everybody else to just change to our way. In literally every other country, what they do, they don't do undergrad. They go straight from high school into, now they decide they're going to be a doctor, and they're going to go right into medical school, but they do it for 6 years. And then they spend a extra year that it's called an intern year, but they're still technically in medical school. So they spend it, so technically they're doing 7 years of their medical training. So they're kind of getting almost the same amount of time, but it's a lot more intense, focused on medicine. So yeah. But with all of that being said, they do not do something comparable to the USMLEs. So if they decide they want to do residency here in the United States, they need to get what's called ECFMG certified. And ECFMG is the Education Council for Foreign Medical Graduates. The other day I couldn't remember what the E stood for. It wasn't coming to me. But it's basically like this layer in the process for foreign medical grads to make their lives a little easier when they're deciding to move from whatever country they're in and go to literally any other country they want to go to for medical education reasonings. So they help them with their visas, they help them with like adjusting to life, they help them get everything in line so that they can apply and things like that. So so they kind of like take care of like all the credentialing regulatory stuff and help them out with it. Of course, they have to pay a large fee for it, but it's really good. So part of what they do is they do what's called ECFMG certificate. And you've seen it before. It's just like looks like a little graduation certificate almost, but of course it says the Education Commission for blah, 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 whatever on the top. And then it'll say their name, and then it says they've been certified, and then it'll give the details of their certification. And as part of that certification, one of the things they have to do is they have to take and have passed USMLE step 1 and 2 for sure. But I think that they even require them to pass step 3. So usually you'll see your foreign, not necessarily, but you'll usually see your foreign medical grads have already completed step 3. Now, obviously that certificate was made right when they had it. So if they did something naughty during their time and training and things like that, that like whatever reason they were blacklisted for, obviously that certificate is not going to be the best indicator to say that they are okay to practice, which happens like very small amount of time, but it does happen. So what usually happens for licensing level and for the GME level, they actually get the full reports of how they are. So they'll like the ECFMG will send a report to say like Dr. Blah was certified blah 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 blah, and then this is anything of concern. And so every time like they switch or whatever institute as part of their credentialing process, that's part of the process. So, but for the sake of applications, you're most likely going to see under the ECFMG reports is actually just a certificate, but later on that will be confirmed if they've have a red flag. Usually the ECFMG sends out once a year, usually around main match season time, to say if they have any red flag candidates on there that like were really bad, then they're not allowed to come here. Then you have your letters of recommendation. The nice thing about the letters of recommendation, if you just hover over where it says like LOR1 or something like that, and you just hover over it, don't click on it, hover over it, and then it will actually display the name of the letter writer, which is nice because then if like you'll get all the time because everybody knows everybody, and they'll say who are their letters from. So a lot of the letters say about basically the same thing, but like there's a lot of weight on who wrote the letters because everybody knows, everybody writes letters in their own style. So you may have a letter writer that they're just so nice and they don't want to hurt their chances of like them not getting in a program. So everybody knows who they are, and then they know that no matter what, it's going to be a nice letter. But then you have the ones that are like tough letter writers, and everybody knows who those are as well. And then they're like, ooh, Dr. X wrote that letter? I want to see it because he doesn't usually write letters, or he's, that's important. Or it's basically they want to see if it's somebody they know. And then they can upload any outside documents like late letters of recommendation. Like I said, letters of recommendation have to be done in a certain amount of time. This is the biggest stress on the candidates when they're trying to get their applications together. And then if it doesn't make it in the system at that time, the candidates aren't allowed to see the letters. So what happens is an admin ends up like emailing or faxing out the letters to all the places that they need to go, which I feel so bad for the admin every single time I get one of those. But you can actually physically upload it into their file. All right, now we are in the bottom left. Oh, I should say, sorry. You can upload those LORs at the bottom of the little, and I'm really sorry that I can't show you the screen, but like at the very bottom of it, it'll say add document, and you click on that and you can upload the document and name it however you want it to be named. So applications. Now that's the bottom left quadrant on your screen. And this is where all the data is. And I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible because I can very easily get really detailed about this. And I apologize if I do, because when you know a lot about something, it's really hard to not do that. So as you can see here, this is a screenshot of what the tabs look like. So this is like their little dossier or their little application binder, like personnel folder or something like that. So this is like all the little sections, little categories you're gonna find this stuff in. So you have these tabs at the top, which I'm gonna cover here. So you have the personal tab. So when you click on the personal tab, the things you're gonna see there are usually things to do with their addresses, their phone numbers, their visas, where they're from originally, all that sort of thing. This is where a lot of that screen data is gonna show up. You can also see their match information. So if you look in that section, the bottom right section of it, you're going to see the plans to participate in the NRMP match. So for residencies, it's required. Main match, you have to do the NRMP. But unless you're ophthalmology, but I mean, I could go down there. But there's also a little section that says couples match. If they're couples matching, if they're not couples matching, you're not going to see this. Let me talk about couples match for a second. So couples match, for those of you that are not familiar with it, is I am applying to residency and my boyfriend is applying to residency as well. but we don't want to get departed from each other for these next 3 or 4 years. So we want to be as close as possible to each other. So we want to match into the same region. It can be a boyfriend, it can be a husband, it can be a fiance, it can be friends, and things like that. You know, you just want your extra support system or whatever. It can be anybody you name, but the two of you have decided that you're going to match together, so you end up in the same region, not the same institution, in the same region. So, so within driving distance to one another, you know, so that you guys can like live together and still be able to travel to where you got, you know, your residencies are and things like that. So when you do that, and I think like when they sign up for it, like I think they click how far though they're willing to go from each other. So the thing to understand about that, and this is getting into NRMP and the NRMP algorithm, which I am not going to talk about today, because that thing is so advanced that the people who developed it won a Nobel Prize for it. So doesn't always make sense. But what happens for the couples match is you have me, and then you have my boyfriend, John, we'll say, who is not my boyfriend, but we'll say for the sake of argument. And then I put in where I wanted to match, and he put in where he wants to match. And usually we're going to try and agree with each other. But of course, it depends on the programs and how much the programs liked each one of us. And so I put in these 5 institutions, and maybe I matched to my number 2 option, which is in California. And John, he went wherever in his list. It doesn't even matter where it went, but where he went in his list and matched to, if he didn't do a couples match, maybe it was in New York. Now, if that was the case and that's what happened on the back end, he's never going to see that part, then they're going to be like, oh, sorry, he's couples matching and she had the higher number. And so they're going to have to go wherever she's at. So he's got to go to California. We're going to go next down your list where you are going in line with the program where you guys each agreed with each other, that is close enough to this other place. Now, let's just say that there is no place in there. He put California like number 1 or something like that, but they didn't feel the same way, so he doesn't get a position. That's the risk they run with doing these things. So that's what couples match is. So for our purposes here, what that means is you'll see down the bottom that I'm couples matching with John, and John, it'll say John's full name, and then it'll say what specialty he's interested in. So I may be psychiatry, and he may be neurosurgery. So yeah, so it will say John blah blah neurosurgery. So if I, as the coordinator, and we've interviewed this person, we've interviewed me. I'm having multiple personalities here. That we interviewed, and we're like, oh, we just love her. She's gonna make a great psychiatrist, just like any coordinator. And we want to see what we can to increase our chances that she's actually gonna come here. So we're gonna call our neurosurgery colleague over here in our same department, and we may say, hey, we interviewed Chris, she's fantastic. But she's couple matching with John, whoever. Can you just take a look at his application if you haven't already, and whatever. It's like an FYI. You can't sway them in any way, whatever. It's like a courtesy. But it could be that John didn't even apply to that same institution, but he applied across town. So now we're on the education tab, which is right here. And the education tab will tell you where they went for their undergrads, where they went for their medical school, not their residency. It'll tell you what awards, societies, language, hobbies. The most interesting part of this tab is hobbies. And the most important part of this tab is the medical education interrupted. The medical education interrupted is if they said for whatever reason that their medical school training was interrupted, and they have to say why and for how long, and they put the description in there. Now, I'm going to say something about this. There's programs called the MD PhD. For those of you that don't know what that is, I decide I want to get medical training, but I want like super focused on research. So I decided to enter a medical school training program that is extended, that gives me a lot of opportunity for research. So it's usually like a 7-year program. And what happens is you'll do like year 1 and 2, which is more of your like courses, book years of medical school. And then they'll stop before they do the clinical part of it. And they'll get like they're going to go hardcore into the research, whether they're like in a lab or they go to NIH or anything like that. So, and then they'll come back and then they'll do the clinical part of their training. So obviously their co-medical students that they had in the first 2 years are completely different now and graduated. But while they're still finishing their clinical part of their medical school. So in a lot of times in their eyes, they see that as their medical training was interrupted, but it's not, because it's part of the program that they chose. Really, interrupted medical school training is if my mom was really sick and I had to put my medical training on hold for whatever amount of time that extended my anticipated graduation time. That's what it really is. So be careful when you read them that they aren't an MD PhD. And a lot of the MD PhDs are so good that they will put that on there. So it's not a negative. Then you have the experience tab, and that's where you find out about residencies, if they were in previous residencies and what they were. Some people, like some FMGs, will actually put their residencies they may have done in their countries. It also has sections for jobs, research positions, and volunteer positions. And this can get a little mucky for them, and they even get confused on where they're supposed to put stuff. And when I look at it, I can see why they get confused. But like jobs are supposed to be jobs that like I receive a paycheck for. But then I was also like, I did a lot of research, I did a lot of research, like time for, I spent a year doing research or whatever as a research fellow that I didn't get paid for. I just did it to improve my application. But then there's that mucky part of like, I decided to be a research coordinator for a couple of years. So I got paid and I did like the research coordinator stuff. But during it, because I got so involved in research, I was doing these research things at the same time. That's like the most common reason that happens. So they're confused on where to put that stuff. So don't hold that against them. I don't blame them. And then there's the volunteer stuff. Publications is just that. It's their publications, it's their posters, their papers, their presentations, that sort of thing. Some may not have any, especially at the medical student level. And depending on your specialty and your requirements of how important that is to have at that level. Then your exams and licenses, any license they may have had, they'll list there. This is where you're going to find the USMLE scores, board certifications, license, that sort of thing. Like I said, there's the report that's uploaded in the documents, and then there's the scores that are put here. And you're probably saying, oh, wow, if they put the scores there, I'm going to open that document, right? No, not necessarily. Because what had happened was one year, ERAS, I think it was a mistake that year, but it made our life easier, but it kind of wasn't fair. But what had happened was like, if somebody had failed any part of their USMLEs, even if they are like currently in the passing state, but at some point they failed, they put this little red dot next to USMLE scores. So then you, as you're going through the applications, you're like, oh my God, I don't even have to open it, which obviously isn't fair, because if they redeemed themselves and got like a super awesome score the second time around, you're never going to know that because you didn't open it. So ERAS took it away, and everybody complained the next year and was like, but I really liked it. It made my life so much easier. But ERAS is like, sorry, it wasn't fair that we did that. So if you do see a red dot there now, what it means is that they are currently in the state of failing. So say they passed their step 1, then they took step 2 the first time, and they failed. They're signed up to take step 2 again, but it just hasn't popped up. It hasn't come yet or whatever. That's when you'll see the red. If the alternate scenario is that they took step 1, passed, took step 2, failed, took it again, passed, you're not going to see the red dot. So that's what that means. That means that they're currently in the status of they're not passing, but they're probably in the process of working on it. Then there's another section in this tab that says licensing limiting factors. And this is where they ask things about, have you ever been suspended, have you ever had a malpractice, hospital privileges revoked, those sorts of questions. You need to understand what your licensing requirements are to understand like how important that is. There's usually like, obviously suspension and having hospital privileges revoked is very serious, but a malpractice could be like a not big deal thing. I know I say malpractice is not big deal and I shouldn't, but what it means is like usually in malpractice cases is there's a team involved. And if, especially if this is for residency as a medical, you may have just been the medical student in the room at the time assigned to the case, and you may not have done anything to do with what the malpractice was about. So that's why I say it's like malpractice is not necessarily going to like kick you off the licensing board or anything like that. They usually will ask for details of the malpractice case and then see if how heavily they're involved or whatever. And then the last tab is limiting factors, and there's 3 questions on there. And last year, the answers you wanted to see wasn't all the same all the way through. They changed it this year though, so don't worry about it. But the questions are like, first question is, are you able to perform the duties of a resident? And if you're not, you need some explanation. Obviously, there shouldn't be very many people that write no there, or else why are you doing this? And then things to do with your criminal history. So now we are in our final status, and this is the part that's the most important for the coordinator, and this is your bottom right quadrant. And I don't know what this is really called, but I call it, other tabs just call it something. Usually status, because that's most of what's here. So over here, you can see that, sorry, I gotta move my little picture here. You can see that here's the tabs, and you have status here. So status is the first one. So as you can see, there's application status, interview status, ranking status, custom status. So application status, it just goes through, and as you tick these things off, your name will appear next to it and the date that you did it. So let me explain what each of these do in the software. Most of the things here are just like, you use them how you want. So I'm going to really point out the ones that will affect other things. For the interview status part, these things all factor in on how you click this. So once you click this, these things, certain things in here will become active, and so on and so forth. Sorry. I'm gonna talk about that in a second. And then ranking status, obviously these are dependent on one another. So application status, application reviewed, you can tick this if somebody's like, this is good for if you have like one reviewer. Oh, it's good for any reviewers. But as they finish and they're like, okay, I've gone through, I reviewed the application, I've made my decision, I'm gonna click application reviewed. So that way, the reason for these things is so that I can run a filter later on where we're at with stuff. So, and this will affect how those filters are run. So if you don't use these, then it's going to affect things to make your life easier later on. On hold, I don't think I've ever used on hold, but I guess there could be reasoning, like maybe you don't have all the documents, which doesn't make sense to me because now you have incomplete application. So for me as a coordinator, even in my beginning times, I knew what they needed to have in their application before I gave it to my program director. So I would just go through them, because in the beginning I had a little bit more time than they did. And I would go through them just quickly to make sure everything was there. And then if something was complete, I'd pick complete application. Sorry, if it wasn't, I would click incomplete application, and then I could go and check up on those people and be like, are you serious about this or not? Some people don't even bother, but this is inactive. Remember how I said before that you can filter based on like who's active or who's not. So as people are reviewing the application, they review them, and they're just like, you know, this person just doesn't fit in with our program, sorry. So then they can click inactive so that you can run a filter to just get them out of your list, basically. That helps later on when you're sending your emails to, you want to filter and send your emails to the people that just you're unable to send an invite to. Then you have withdrawn by program, which is a similar, obviously similar status. The thing with withdrawn by program, if you click that, the candidate will actually get notified. So that's the difference. Inactive, they will not get notified. Withdrawn by applicant, obviously that's grayed out because only the applicant can click that status. And then will start. Will start is as soon as you find out match happened and you found out who matched with us, then you go in and you click will start next to them so that they can do their upload. The GME office can do their upload. Now, interview status, you have selected to interview. So say your program director comes back and says, okay, these are the ones we're inviting. So then you can, on all those people, you can make their status selected to interview. And you can do that as a bulk action like I showed you before. So let's say I don't use ERAS to do my scheduling. And I'm going to use whatever outside format I'm going to use, whether it be LMS or Interview Broker or something on my own or some other software. I can click here to say invited privately because I invited them through a private software. And then once they interviewed, because usually I use those softwares for that part, then you click you can run filters on it later. And when you do your end of the year data, it helps out to keep up with these sorts of things. Now, say you do use ERAS scheduler, which I will cover later on. You're going to click here, select it to interview. And then what's going to happen is so there's two parts of the schedule where you can do it all yourself, or you can have them self-schedule. So if you do it all yourself, well, no, either way, I'll cover more of that detail later. What happens is everything that you're doing in Scheduler or they're doing in Scheduler will make a status, and then these things will get clicked based off. It's all automated through the Scheduler. So that's how that stuff works. This is good to know as you're running your filters again. And of course, they'll say decline, and then that will show up there. Ranking status is, okay, you're at the end of the interview season, you've done your last interview day, and now you've decided that there's 50 applicants that you interviewed, and 5 of them are just not ranked. So what you do is you just take the other 45 and you're going to make them selected for ranking. That will push them over to the ranking interface, which we'll talk about later. And then you can do your ranking based off of that. That's how you get them to populate into that part of the software. And then once you send them off to NMP, you could save ones you ranked, because maybe in discussions you decided differently. So now you just say ranked, and then that's just good for historical value. And then there's a section called custom status. So you can create all your own custom statuses. Like I said, this whole section here is going to help you for when you do filters. So don't create a custom status for something that you can run a filter on and find it some other way in the software. And I'll cover that more when we go over filtering. So now we're on the interviews. So the next couple tabs, there's the interviews tab, which you can see I didn't show it here. But what the interviews tab is it's based off of if you use ERAS for your interview platform, meaning that people score through ERAS on your interviews. I've never used this part of the software, so I'm not even going to talk about it and pretend I know, because it's just not the most feasible thing. It's really just for evaluation. So within this day of virtual interviewing, it's just not the most ideal. Reviewers, we already discussed reviewers in the very beginning. Communication. So like I said, you can send these emails, and when you send emails to the candidates and all this back and forth that happens, it makes it part of their application. And this is where you find that information. It also will print out in the list and everything if you select communication. So as you can see, all the stuff I sent this person is here, their replies, everything. And if I want to see what's said about that, I can click on it and open it up. And as you can see, it's got the dates and everything is just part of the permanent file. Now, a really cool part of the software that a lot of people don't realize you can do is you can upload various types of communication into here. So say you got outside communication, maybe they emailed you privately, maybe it's like a concerning email, or maybe it's like, oh, I got these new publications, whatever. You can add this stuff. The most common reason that I use this part of the software is when we got an email from an outside faculty member that was highly recommending them to be interviewed, basically. We all seen it. So when I get those emails, I upload those as well. So to upload them, you click this add button down here, and then another window that I didn't copy here because it's silly to copy it, says, it'll say what type of communication you want to put in there. So you can say email, phone call, fax. There's a fourth one, but I never remember what it is. The only one I ever use is email. And then this will pop up when I click email. So I can literally type in from to subject, pick the date that the email was sent, time if I want to, then copy and paste all the text that was in that email and put it in here. If there was an attachment, like say they're like, oh, check on my publication, blah, 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 which always gets me because you don't normally upload publications at all in ERAS, but they wanted to send you their new one. I get it, they're excited. But anyways, so you can set an attachment, and then this question on here says if you want this attachment, not the email, but the attachment to appear in the local documents. And that's that little top right field I told you about. So depending on what the communication is, you may or may not want to do that. And then you click add, and it will become part of this. So then on down the road, like that situation where it was like, oh, you need to interview this person kind of thing. And then it'll show up in the application. So everybody interviewing will understand. All right. Now the attributes tab. So attributes is the best way to personalize things so that you can filter stuff based off of things that are important to you that don't already exist in ERAS. So I do want to say, don't make anything that for things that already exist. So this was before me, somebody created this little attribute here, which is kind of a useless attribute because I can run a filter to get that same information. It's probably people who didn't understand the software to understand that field exists. That's why I say know the fields and know how you can pull stuff. What I would use it for is something like this. So your program director gave you your list of applicants to invite, and they said, and say you have 50 slots over the course of your season, and your program director has like 75 people that you could invite. Obviously you don't have enough slots, but we all know that not everybody's going to accept the invites. So he'll be like, he or she has to say, we'll say, okay, here's who we invite first. And then if they don't all accept or whatever, then let's start in this list, and then we'll start in this list. So those are what I call interview waves. And so I created an attribute called interview wave, and it literally says 1, 2, 3. And then I'll take the first list, and then I'll make them interview wave 1, 2, and 3. This is also good for reporting later on when you say, okay, we initially invited 50 people, but this many people accepted, so then we pulled this many backups or something like that. That's all important data to look at so that you can see how you need to adjust your interviews. Another important one is if you use an outside software for your scheduling, and so the dates are being scheduled over there, but you want to run a filter later on so you can get ready for the interview day in ERAS. So obviously the interview dates aren't going to be, there's no place for them to enter it because they didn't use our scheduler. And you can use the scheduler private event thing, but it just seems like double work to me when you can just make an attribute with all your interview days and then just like apply it quickly. The other thing is if they qualify for a specialized scholarship, I'll use that here because that's not in the software. You set these up through setup, which we'll discuss later. What was I feel like there was something in my head a second ago that was important to say about this. So the notes section, the notes tab here, literally it's where you write notes. Keep in mind when you add a note, your name, time, and date stamp are applied. You can delete your own notes. You can't delete other people's notes. Scores it's ERAS's way of how they create a scoring system in there. They work really weird because they put weights on the scores. And I don't fully understand it, so I've never used it. I'm not even going to pretend I know about something that I don't.